And your life is going to change. You are going to be different. My name is and your life is going to change. You are going to be different. My name is and your life is going to change. You are going to be different. You are going to be out. You are going to be bigger and larger than ever. Imagine the impossible. And you know why? Because just you and I would find the power that's been dormant inside of you all of this time. And all of this time you were afraid to go out and no longer will that be the case. You will be shout. You will be the God or goddess of you. You will be the one that every other human said, look, they're there. The master's there. The teacher there. There's no one that will make my life different. And what am I to do that? Remember, I'm just telling you, I'm here to tell you. I'm here to change your life. Your life will no longer be the same. Together, our brains and thoughts are before you know it. Anything you imagine possible will become possible for one simple reason. And it is possible. And your life is going to change. You are going to be different. My name is and your life is going to change. You are going to be different.
Welcome to another program of Uncommon Sense. You're listening to the voice of Dr. Mel Gill, and today we'll be having several discussions on what some people have been asking me to talk about, which is spirituality, but from a perspective in which everyone can use it in a practical way. Hang on for a second. Let me set this up so that I have questions that I can see and answer on Facebook and StreamYard. So welcome everybody. And by the way, if you would like to be part of this broadcast, please feel free to click on this link, and that will take you to the program, and then you will appear with me, and then you can share your knowledge and your wisdom with everybody as well. So to answer some of the questions that people have asked about how meditation can make people happy, well, happiness is not the end goal of meditation. Peace of mind is, and happiness is an extrapolation. You become happy by enjoying the things that you have. You become happy by enjoying everything that is given to you. You become happy by having gratitude or a sense of gratitude, literally as you walk through life, as you go through from one thing to another, to one feeling to another, one place to another. And gratitude and all of these things don't always happen every day. And sometimes you go up, you go down, sometimes you wake up and you don't want to feel grateful for anything at all. You just want to let it go. You just want to let your mind rest. You don't want to work hard. And so as a result, you experience what you experience, or sometimes you're surrounded by people who are not the best people you should be surrounding yourself with. People who agitate you, people who upset you, people who you have certain expectations from. Hey, Mamji, welcome. Kunam, welcome as well to the show. And everybody else listening that I don't see actually here. And Ayusa Korn, I don't know, but welcome to the show as well. So Dr. O, that's who it is. You know, when we think of the warmth of summer and how we can make a cricket sing, the quality of being held by someone, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or physically as well, enlivens your heart. So in the same way, when we go around the world starting to look for people who are going to be the people who are going to love us because they're going to fill that void inside of us and all of that, we are subject to that person's ups and downs, upheavals and what have you, and the person's sanity, assuming they are sane. But at the same time, if you were to depend on yourself for that happiness, then there's only one person you depend on, yourself. And so when you put all of your happiness and all your trust on something else or someone else, or your reputation, which also depends on someone else, or what people say about you, which is in my world, in my life, I have probably about 60% of the people who make comments in my videos here and other videos around the world are positive, and necessarily so. And it helps me to design. They'll ask me, can you speak about this next? Can you speak about that next? Can you answer this question? And I'm more than willing, and I want to help. But then 40% of them may not like me. And so they say derogatory things, terrible things. And of course, they have no proof. And so you see these everywhere. Characters like this exist, and they will exist in your life. There will be people who won't like you for whatever reason. And you have no idea why they don't like you. You want to make them like you for what? Because there's a sense of emptiness inside of you that needs to work so hard at it. No, if they don't like you, they don't like you. Just turn around, walk away. Don't explain yourself. Don't try to, these people need a public forum. And more times than not, if you want to know who they are, click on the names of the people making the things. And if it's YouTube, you'll find it's an empty channel. You'll find no one, no videos, nothing. They use that, and these cowards say what they say from behind these personas that are not real. It's not even their real name. So you can waste all your time, like I did in the beginning of my life, trying to answer everybody, but then you cannot please everybody all the time. So at some point, you got to learn to let go. And COVID has done that for a lot of people. A lot of you have learned that it doesn't matter what people think of you socially, because that whole social thing is gone. It doesn't matter what people think of you in terms of your reputation and what you've done and things you have to boast about, because right now COVID has made the richest of people and the poorest of people pretty much on the same level. It's pretty interesting how it works. So pay attention to the fact that only you should be concerned about what you feel about yourself, your reputation, your what have you, and everything. And besides that, full enlightenment, if you're trying to achieve that, is not really that possible unless you've gone through a whole bunch of psychological stuff, when you start and when you've gone through them and you started to look at yourself without being narcissistic. And that's very tough to do. Look at a mirror and ask yourself these questions without hanging on to the conclusion. Then you'll ask yourself, can I trust that this is really the highest form of enlightenment that you've achieved, that you've gained this transmission from wherever place, inside, outside, pineal, wherever the place might be. And you'll find that it takes a lot of training. I remember a long time ago reading about a person, a psychologist at that time, who had a very New York attitude and working class sensibility. And he worked directly with Fritz Perls himself, and he trained him in Gestalt therapy. Now, that person had lived in India looking for sages and gurus and everybody to help him. And he eventually grew up and left out and became part of the faculty of a Tibetan meditation center somewhere in California, Berkeley. So he worked with a lot of people on several things that had to do with the mind, like a preparation to get you ready for the state and the life of enlightenment. Because when you reach enlightenment, you've got to ask yourself a very important question. Why are you doing that? What do you need it? Oh, it's something I want to do. It's something I want to have because it seems nice. No, enlightenment is a very destructive process and jarring process. It's not simple and it's not smooth, because you have to let go of everything you believed in, everything that you thought was real. Some days you're going to feel the wave of, am I right? Have I done the right thing? Have I made the right decision? And so on and so forth. Other days, there are no waves. It's going to be so crystal clear and calm that you can see down to the bottom of the ocean. So those are things you got to pay attention to, because the energy that you exude at that point comes right off of you. The energy, meaning in several different ways, the energies that have to do with what you believe is possible and what you believe is impossible. So possible and impossible would determine your energy states, but at the same time will determine how you interact with people, whether they are directly or whether it's on a Zoom call or on a telephone, on a whatever means, WhatsApp, and whatever way you use to communicate. I remember Ken Wilber wrote a book many, many years ago called A Sociable God. If you read that book, you'll see that there are probably about 9 to 10 valid definitions of spirit and spirituality. So what are the few definitions that people have? You know, the thing is, there's a lot of misunderstanding around the topic of spiritual awakening, that sometimes we fail to reveal, we fail to recognize some relevant terms. And these are only revealed to us the more insights we have into the workings of life, the more insight we have into the way our brain operates. So we link spirituality to the context of religion, but in my experience, just to give you an idea, oh dear, let's see. Can you still hear me? Because my thing just got frozen. How did that get frozen? Let me know with a thumbs up if you are still watching me. Oh dear. All right. Hang on for a second. I think I have a little bit of an issue here. There are problems with the transmission. Error while loading. And here we go. If you can hear me clearly right now, please send me a thumbs up or send me a message and tell me that you are listening and that you can hear me clearly. Because according to this, my transmission went dead a few minutes ago. That's very odd. Technical difficulties. Okay. I don't know how to read this. Can you hear me, everybody? You can? Let me know. Oh, look, it just came back. I don't understand this. And there are no comments. Swipe left to reveal comments, which is left. This is left. There it is. Okay. And Orlin, thank you so much, on YouTube as well. Sorry about that. It just broke my train of thought. It just froze. This froze and my phone froze and this froze. And now it looks like, yes, I'm moving. So I'm okay. What was I talking about? Definitions. Yes, you have to have a clear definition of what it is. We often link spirituality in the context of religion, but in the way that I've experienced life so far, it can become problematic because for now, to make it easier in this context and in this talk, if it continues and we don't get interrupted with technical difficulties again, let's define spiritual as a quality of being beyond the physical or beyond the material domain of existence. That would be easier. And so, therefore, by extrapolation, we can say that enlightenment too can actually mean many different things, but it's often associated with cognition, the ability to think, recognize, know, and the ability to know is very important in almost everywhere you are. And Josephine says, I'm frozen. And, or Josephine says she likes the movie Frozen. I'm not sure. Oh, now, okay. Yes, Josephine. We're all recovering from the frozenness. Ting Maliwan from Thailand, Savastika. Thank you for joining us. So you can have an enlightened mind through a disciplined study of higher spiritual principles, but this enlightenment doesn't mean you're spiritually awake or a person who's psychologically aware. So what is spiritual awakening? Well, it's very simple. Let me say it in English. Spiritual awakening is an awakening of a dimension of reality beyond the confines of your ego. The ego is our exclusive sense of self, or I, what I have built, who I am, my reputation, my hoo-ha-ha-ha-ha. All that doesn't mean anything. When you head towards enlightenment, you begin to realize other people's opinions have nothing to do with you, have everything to do with them. And people who believe them and listen to them, well, you found your 40%, so you're okay. So this awakening process occurs for whatever reason when the ego somehow says, let's go, so that a higher self, let's go away, so that a higher self or spirit can arise inside of you. And your need to have and function within that spiritual bubble, if you will, that expands from within you like a spiritual fire, begins to be more comfortable than the illusion of living in the world that is transitory, not long-lasting, has no final implications in any form of mind growth, opening, awareness, all of that. So the average individual is more archetype than human, an idea. So that is the ego, which is mostly a collection of archetypes. What are archetypes? Programs and meta programs, or set patterns of behavior. So the Taoists actually call this series of programs the acquired mind, a set of mundane conditions that we collect since birth. And some of them are conscious, some of them are unconscious, and we don't pay attention to that. So spiritual awakening implies the return of what the Taoists call the original spirit, or the face before you were born, or what Jung called the self. So it's this return of spirit that makes us truly human, and therefore more alive in everything that we do, from our task to our thoughts, to our emotions, to our relationships, not just with each other, to everything that we respond to in the world, our relationship to food, our relationship to our bodies, our relationship to our environment, whether they involve forests or trees or whatever the case might be. So you have to understand that this is a little bit different from like spiritual awakening and psychic awakening are two different things. This is the other common confusion, actually, between the term spiritual awakening and psychic awakening. What's the difference? Well, psychic awakening is relating to the activation of things related to the pineal gland. 3 months ago, we had a program, a discussion here, where we talked about and we explained how to do it. Open the pineal gland. Refer to that 3 months ago, and you'll see what it is we're talking about. With this opening of the pineal gland, you open up to other dimensions of reality beyond this limited three-dimensional realm of space and time. Spiritual awakening, in contrast, involves the opening of the heart center. It's a process that's more closely associated with your own psychology, the emotional body, your soul, if you will. So that's the thing we have to pay attention to. So a lot of people, when I started doing this, said that it didn't make any sense to them. I'm going to have to put this somewhere where I can reach it. Right there. Don't fall. Disobedient cup. Okay, it's good now. So a lot of people were confused, and they said they didn't know what the differences were, how to get rid of the ego, and how to build up more of the spirit. Now, the ego, or what the Taoists call the lower soul, believes that it is in charge of yourself, your thoughts, your relationships, your emotions, all of that. The ego is our sense of self, or the I-ness of being. The Buddhists also have a word for it in Pali. Last Friday's program, when we were talking to Dr. Nisha Rani and to Ashok Thakur, we were also talking about those things. So when you say things like, I am, example, Mel Gill, I have a job. I'm a psychologist. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a spiritual counselor, whatever. I have a house. I have a father, mother, brother, sister, child, a headache, even anything that you possess smacks of ego. So when you say, I think a certain thought, whatever that thought is, you can think of, you can fill in the blanks with whatever you want. I think that we should be paying more attention to the thoughts that we think instead of the thoughts that we think. Whatever. I think, therefore I am. I think. You get the idea. That's the ego. It's possessive because it experiences itself as separate from everything else and everybody else. So this lower soul is driven by base pleasures, negative emotions. It's trying to meet Maslow's basic, triangle of needs, the basic human needs. The appetite of the lower soul is insatiable. And if it's left untouched or unchecked, it goes on for eons and lifetimes. And that's why some people are doomed to return, because they see things at base level. So when Maslow said man is a perpetually wanting animal, he was referring to his ego. So therefore, there's also a spirit, though, a higher self, or if you will, a higher soul. And this divine spark isn't driven by these basic needs. Instead, this spirit is calm. It's neutral. It's compassionate. It's understanding. It's intuitive. So while the ego accumulates knowledge through learning, the spirit intuits reality by virtue of what it is. What is reality? And therefore questions everything. The ego thinks, the spirit knows. As simple as that. The ego thinks and the spirit knows. So while the ego is always doing things and being involved in the daily activities and so on and so forth, the spirit remains eternally in a state of beingness. And when you're in a state of beingness, you are on the edge of bliss. So when there is a spiritual awakening, let me see if there are any questions. No more questions. Nope, no more questions. Okay. If you have any questions for me, by the way, people, feel free to just simply interrupt me or call, and I will bring you up, and then you can ask your questions or you can share your insights. And I would really appreciate that as well. Welcome to the studio, Malinka and Jaishri and Lee Narit. Welcome to the studio. We're talking about the differences between spirituality, religion, separation of spirit from ego. So, what was my question? What happens during spiritual awakening? We tend to identify exclusively with the ego in our daily lives. So as the process of spiritual awakening unfolds, the ego begins to sublimate to the spirit. It melts into the spirit. It's the language of the Tao, if you will. The lower soul gets refined into the higher soul. And arriving at the spirit, or psychic wholeness, was the goal of this man, Carl Jung, when he talked about individuation. Individuation is when you start to develop and grow into that psychic wholeness. But despite popular belief, this doesn't really generally happen in a single moment of awakening like it did with Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. So while we can have peak experiences that opens us up to occasional self transcendent realities, these experiences tend to be fleeting. They're not there all the time. They happen, but they're fleeting. Instead, the developmental literature actually explains a lot for a lot of people that there are stages of psycho-spiritual growth, and these permanent stages tend to develop over time. Sometimes you will develop a quantum leap from one level to another of understanding and being, and you become a totally different person. Your value systems change, your ability to elicit better responses from inside of you to pull up more happier experiences, more happier emotions is easier. It's like when you pull out the first cookie, and that's what these peak experiences are like. When you pull out that first cookie in a tight jar, the rest are easier to pull out. When you pull out the first pickle, if it's not a good experience, and you find the pickles are all packed together, it's so tough to pull out the first one. But after you do, everything gets loosened up, and so therefore you get to pick all the rest of the pickles more easily. Bad analogy, I know, but I was just thinking of having pickles right now. I don't know why, just was. So and this is part of the reason many people are confused about spiritual awakening, because walking in nature, or if you're on a psychedelic substance of any kind, they may have a beautiful experience of oneness for you, for example, but this experience that you feel is momentary. And so the individual structure of consciousness hasn't quite changed yet. So you have to pay attention to that, because you fall into some traps that you need to be aware of. Call them spiritual traps, or some false signs of spiritual awakening. You have to be able to pay attention that there is an authentic symptoms of spiritual awakening, and then I'll talk about the common falsehoods that are also related to spiritual awakening, so that people who think they are spiritually awake are really not, and you become a show or a circus for other people to watch. Trap number one. Is when you think you're good and others are evil. This is a belief that is deeply rooted in most of us as a species. It is the need to be right, a deadly need, one of the 9 deadly needs that we have, that destroys relationships and our peace of mind. And it's a typical program or meta program in our head that is taught to us in all Western religions. To uproot this belief requires a lot of shadow work. And we'll talk about shadow work if I have time at the end of this program, and what you need to do. You'll know that you've undone this limiting belief when you stop judging other people and instead see yourself in everybody you meet. Literally, like the Hindus say, namaste. I salute the divinity I see within you. Also, at the same time, you tend to stop judging when you start to practice thinking in a non-dualistic way. There is no good. There is no bad. There simply is. There is no evil. There is no good. It just is. There is no one is a name calling when people call names. No one's a bastard. No one's a bitch. There just is. That's who they are. No one is totally that person is an angry person. Yeah, but they're angry most of the time. It just there's a what's the opposite of angry? Peaceful, laughing, hilarious. I have no clue actually, because it's been a while since I visited the anger department there. But there is a way for you to recognize the world differently, and then you begin to realize that. The trap number 2, the most important trap, is when you start identifying yourself as a spiritual person. So when people say to me, Mel, are you a spiritual person? What religion are you? The first question, what religion are you? I said, I'm not any religion right now. I'm trying to make my own, but the government doesn't allow me to create my own religion. And they're all confused and look at me like, are you, what? I just laugh and walk away and say, are you a spiritual person? I don't know what that means. Tell me what you mean by spiritual. And then they start to tell me. And there's a reason I say that. It's because when they start to tell me what they think a spiritual person is, I hear their criteria. I hear what they want to project onto me. And it's not the correct definition. Not correct is not the right word. It's not the definition that is real or the truth that's out there. It is their definition. It is their truth. And so I pay attention to that by asking those questions. But whenever you ask incisive questions like this, personal questions back, even if you're saying it back to people, you have to always say it with a smile, because it's always more accepted. And then you'd be surprised what you can do as well. So again, there's a lot of shadow work involved. And then when you start to work on that shadow thing, then you transcend all of that. Because when you identify yourself as a spiritual person, this false identification is universal in all languages. It's not just you listening to me right now. It's in religion, it's in New Age circles. It's out there, it's everywhere, you know? You are neither spiritual nor material. You transcend and you include both. And when you realize this, then you walk the practical path of spirituality. You begin to realize that even though you may be a quote unquote spiritual person, don't say that because that puts you into a pigeonhole. That's very difficult for you to even recognize, and then for other people to look at you and say, right, really, So just say you're searching, you're looking, you're not sure, and none of us are. You see, there is no the truth. There is just a truth. And there are many billions of truths out there. But the minute you transcend all of that truth, or the necessity to find that truth, then you begin to realize the importance of going in the flow. And when you realize that, nothing matters that much. So identifying yourself as spiritual is a sign of spiritual ego, or ego inflation of one kind. So shadow work, background work will help you see that you're no different or no better than anybody else. The trap number 3, that's saying 3 in Tibetan. Let me say it again. Trap number 3. When you start seeking love and light, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people who are pursuing love and light and goodness. That's another deep-rooted program in religious and New Age teachings and what have you, the hippies and all of those, that actually block authentic spiritual development. Acting spiritual creates a persona or a social mask that gives other people the impression that we are good people. And while this persona might elevate our status or whatever we think we have, oh, there goes an enlightened person and and increase your self-esteem, it does not promote psychological or spiritual growth, real psychological or real spiritual growth. In truth, spiritual awakening comes from the opposite direction, where we face the fears, the anger, guilt built up over a lifetime, grief that we store in us since childhood because we've been abandoned, we've been traumatized, we've been hurt. People taking advantage of us have caused us massive distress and psychological damage as well. So coming to terms with these experiences paves the way for authentic spiritual development. And from there you grow and you become real at that point. Trap number 4 is when you start to act nice or acting nice. Acting nice and being innocent isn't a spiritual awakening sign. It's actually an indication of psychological immaturity, actually. We're told by our parents, in various institutions, school, religion, some government bodies, socialist government bodies, we have to be nice, we have to be courteous, we have to behave ourselves. And we comply with this demand to varying degrees because it's the law in some cases or it's the dogma in some cases. And therefore it kind of increases or reinforces the shadow side of us, not the real side of us. So if you're acting nice, it's a sure sign that someone is manipulating you. Maybe the original manipulator or trickster is usually a parent, or now, well, it's in you because you continue that being a parent to other people as well. So you have to pay attention to that at some point. In contrast, a mature adult acts assertively without seeking the approval of other people. You don't have to be nice. You just are if it is truly you. And that would actually, when you are authentically, truly nice as a person, then that's great. And if people think you're not nice because of something you said and done, it doesn't matter. Don't try to be fitting into somebody else's idea of the spiritual box that they've projected into you or onto you and saying that this is how you should be. So pay attention to that as well. The 5th trap, which is also deadly, is believing that you're better than other people. Perhaps you see a pattern in what I'm discussing here with you and these traps, and how they relate to ego inflation. Because spiritual awakening grounds us in our humanity. It allows us to recognize that we're all connected and that we're all in a journey, and everybody has their own difficulty, and everybody has their own pain, and everybody has their own struggle. And too many people are needing other people to listen, but we instead are asking them to listen to us. So there are very few people out there who are counselors, givers, nurturers, teachers, who would let to become a listening ear to all of these people that need help. So while we are growing spiritually, we're grounding ourselves in the fact that we are human, like everybody else. And yet more often what happens, spirituality becomes another tool to dissociate ourselves, to become more judgmental and grandiose. I am on a spiritual path. I am 16 levels above you. And it's like, what the hell? This isn't a video game like Candy Crush where you can reach levels. It doesn't make that kind of sense. The more spiritual you are, actually, the more you tend to serve, because you know that this is the only way sometimes to erase bad karma. And we'll talk about karma another day, otherwise we'll be here for hours. Because doing good, I think the Sikhs call it, and the Hindus call it seva, where you serve without expecting to be served in return. Just give, give, give. But if you serve and you want people to watch people, I'm serving, I'm a serve, defeats the whole purpose. So anyway, just to let you know, even when you secretly believe that you're better than other people, this trap actually happens when you read a lot of spiritual texts, and you may read 10,000 books. I had a person in my class once stood up and said, "Mel, I know everything about spirituality and life and what the truth is." I said, "Wow, I'm so glad I ran this class. I didn't know one of my students knew everything already. That's cool. How do you how did you reach there, and could you help us learn the steps you took? I read more than 10,000 books. And that just proves you can read 10,000 books. What are the signs? What are the where's the evidence that you are there, and that somehow we can feel that glow coming from you or something? Tell us what we're looking for. And I told him something, and he hated me, but by the end of my 7-day course, we became very good friends. I said, an ass, a donkey carrying 10,000 spiritual books is still a donkey. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. It doesn't matter how many religious conferences or seminars or webinars you may have attended, or certifications you might have got from God and His mother. But you have to pay attention to one thing. What has all of your learning taught you about the flow of life? What has all your learning taught you about your connection with everybody around you? There's a purpose to your being here. What has all of this taught you about how you can transmit a lot of this information, energy to other people? What has it taught you about healing? Not just emotionally, not just mentally, but psychically. How do you heal other people who have a lot of pain to go through? And when you become awake, combine it with the psychic awareness, then you become truly, truly, truly sorry and very, very generous with as many people around you as possible, because they're about to have a very difficult life. And you're awakening to the fact that most of this thing that people find difficult is really nothing at all. So, and this trap happens, when you secretly believe that you are more spiritual or better than others. When you join even a religious group, a cult, or some church, and things like this. And so I'm part of the big new religion church, the pastor is really good. He spent 30 million on his wife's spirit singing career, so it must be good. So I don't know. Or they start a new spiritual practice, whatever the practice is, or they find a guru, a popular guru that will actually turn their life into something a lot better. And so therefore they want the whole idea for ego, to recognize ego, is when ego speaks, and you will hear ego speaking. That means what people say. When you hear that they want to be special, this is why most relationships fail. Because, honey, sweetheart, I know you've had many girlfriends. I know you've had many boyfriends, whatever the case, or many camels in the past. But am I the most special? Ego seeks specialness. Specialness is an ego game that most people are not aware of. Am I the same as everybody else? And you're stuck. You don't know what to say. Holy crap, the night is going to be difficult. I'm going to be sleeping in the doghouse if I tell you the truth. But yours, yes, I've had many kisses before, but yours is the best. Bullshit. You cannot tell the difference between that and everything else. So you don't have to speak the truth and ruin somebody's day who's not awakened. If that's who they are, then it's not your job to wake them up. It's not your job to snatch ego from them. You only work on yourself. Only on yourself. That's all you can work on. So when you think you have found it, be on very high alert. And be on very high alert if you meet anybody on the road who say, I found the truth. This belief is a symptom of a specific early stage of psychological development, not a spiritual awakening sign. So all of these subconscious, and they are subconscious signs, they point to something that you know very well. It's called emotional vampirism. These are people that suck energy from you instead of give energy to you. You can hear it in their voices. You can hear it. Something just doesn't feel right. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't feel right. And so your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind is more powerful than you can ever imagine. And when we are ready, and I have my studio done and everything's set up, it's not yet set up. I'm taking my time. I'm sorry. Because there's so many things I'm learning, so many things I'm doing at whatever it is that I'm creating, so many books to write, so many scripts to put together, that I forgot. And I forget a lot, and I can't find the right people because of this COVID thing. But I will bring them together, and then we'll start to broadcast over there, and I'll put all these lessons out, especially about how to get rid of the shadow self and the shadows that follow you that you can't see. And the reason I call them shadows is because, like any shadow, you don't see it when you're facing the sun, when you're facing the target, in the direction of your growth. The moment you see it is when you start to reflect and you start to think about all the things you say, all the things you feel and think, and then you turn around and look at it and examine it without any form of judgment. Don't judge yourself. We are the harshest judge of anybody we know. It's not other people. Other people, you can leave them; they can go away. But ultimately, people will know them. You have to be careful of this thing that most heart attack people will know as well. It's called a spiritual bypass. Perhaps it's the biggest trap in the spirituality game. Here, in the spiritual bypass, we use spiritual ideas and practices to avoid unsolved emotional or psychological wounds. Now, these wounds must be addressed to proceed in any form of psycho-spiritual development. But you don't avoid them. We often resist this process because addressing these wounds requires going through many painful, reminiscing, discomfort, that all of these things represent as well. It's very hard. It's not easy. And these wounds are mainly, like I said before, childhood traumas, the bad memories that people leave us with, how we've been hurt, taken advantage of, used. In fact, virtually every emotional trigger you have in your present environment is likely from your past. If somebody says something and you go, what do you mean by that? That's a trigger that you need to look at. As Heidegger, I think, once put it, he said, the dreadful has already happened. What happens afterwards is how you put it into something more constructive, something that has a benefit in terms of learning. Not everybody who looks back will find learning in everything they see. Some people will look back and say, I have no clue why that happened in the overall context of things. And sometimes the clarity of why something happened may not be available to you until you are gone from this life, until you check out. And you have to pay attention because it takes a certain degree of consciousness to be able to see beyond this lifetime. What you see is narrow within this lifetime with this very limited equipment that you have called the brain, or consciousness, the way the brain has decided it, or consciousness, the way in which you have allowed it to function. Consciousness that's expanded, consciousness that's become awakened, consciousness that's fully enabled is able to see much more and understand much more, but not within the context of a three-dimensional universe. It's in the context of your emotional state and blessedness as you begin to realize that everything that's happening to you was really meant to happen to you. Everything that's happening to you now is meant to happen to you now. Whatever you're going through right now, the pain or the quote-unquote unfairness is meant to be. It really is meant to be. And without it, you wouldn't be the person you're going who's going through all of this. A great many individuals in this various Eastern and even Western religions fall into this spiritual bypass trap. And for most of my years in the early 20s and 30s, I did too. You know, that and I didn't want to avoid all of this. And so some people go into monasteries, some people go into nunneries. No, not nunneries, convent. They go into convents. They want to get away from all of this, but yet they're taking their pain with them. People who jump from one marriage to another marriage don't realize that, yeah, I'm leaving that old for this new guy, this new girl, this new camel, whatever it is you're interested in. I don't judge. And so, but yet you bring all of that past ill learning, that pain, the tension, the way of thinking, the way of feeling and generating, you bring it with you. That's your baggage that you're bringing with you to the new hotel. The new hotel is that person. And why do I say hotel? Because it's temporary. You want a room for the night, for the week, for the month, for the year, for the decade. Who knows? For a lifetime, maybe. I'm not trying to dampen your spirits or anything like that. True signs of spiritual awakening. Your behavior begins to change for the better. Your behavior begins to be inclusive of everything and everyone around you. No exclusions. Oh, I can't eat this. No, that's not part of my religion. I can't do this. That's not part of my religion. I can't associate with those people. That's not part of my religion. Or my spirituality. My spirituality demands I no longer listen to bad words. What are bad words? Come on, think about it. You give bad words meanings that your dirty mind has. Clean your mind out and they're no longer bad. Everything is very useful. So that's how you know. Your behavior begins to become inclusive, begins to change for the better. And everybody notices. But you're not doing it for everybody. Pay attention to that. You're doing it only for yourself. Another thing that happens is when you begin to experience a deepening sense of your emotional wellspring, the depth inside of you, that well, that spiritual well inside of you, that you can draw endless nourishment from, endless water, endless, wow, I cannot even begin to tell you. Sometimes when I sit alone and I'm in some mixed company and things like that, I find time alone a little bit, or I tell people hang on, I have to make a phone call. And really, there's nobody on the phone. And I go outside, I go somewhere else, and I just go, and the phone is here, obviously, it's off. So it doesn't damage any brain cells. And I'm just feeling this sense that comes up from inside. And I just feel an outburst of love, just love, even for the people I have just met, even for myself also, for everybody who's related to me, my father, mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, grandfather, grandmother, everybody that's related to me, and friends, even Facebook friends. I try an experiment right now with all of my 4,900 friends, most of whom I haven't met, to send love every day, peace. And I know a lot of them are not my friends; they're frenemies. There's a word I learned. It's called frenemies. They're actually enemies, or in their minds they think they're enemies, and so they hate me for one reason or another. And but they remain friends because they want to keep track of what it is I'm doing, and so on and so forth. So, and I send love in that direction. Am I able to? Am I happy for someone who is a-hole, right? In my mind, for doing this and that, this and that. When I get judgmental, can I send love? And yeah, I can. And at that point, the judgment disappears. It's a miracle how it works, but it's true. At that point, when you send love to people that you are judgmental about, all those judgments leave you. It doesn't make them good people. It just means you are no longer judging. Whether they're good or bad, it's none of your business. So a third sign is that when you're slowing down and reflecting on your past to understand where you are at the moment, you are here because of everything that happened to you in the past. You are here because of everything you've gone through. You are in the house you're in, or you are not in any house. You are in the job you're in, or you're not in any job. You're in the financial situation because of everything that has happened to you. Everything that has, and from here, you can go forward in any direction you want. It's not a necessity. You don't have to beg a big universe to give you everything. You can actually make everything happen. I don't mean in a magical way, like rubbing a lamp and making it happen. I mean in a way in which, well, rather than keep you in mystery, let me teach you how to do it right now before we talk about the other signs of spiritual awakening. There are 5 steps to get anything you want, to achieve anything you want to achieve, and to be anything you want to be. Step 1, know where you are. Know what resources you have. Know who you are. Know your skills. I think out there for free, you'll find on the internet something called a SWOT analysis, SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. What the hell does T stand for? I used to know this stuff when I was doing a lot of this work. Maybe one of you can help me with this as well. And so as you start to pay attention to all of this, you begin to realize that this is the whole of you. And if you're lacking in any way, go out and get it, and then you'll be able to continue. So step 1, know who you are. Step 2, know who you want to be, or know what you want clearly. Absolutely. You can't say something like, I want to be rich. How rich exactly? Because then you'll have a clear target. And how much money do you want to make? Or what kind of a house are you looking for? What kind of a mate are you needing? And so on and so forth. And then you take a look back now again, as that's step 2. Step 1, you look at what you have and ask yourself, do I have what I need to go there? Do I have the skills necessary to take me there? And so on and so forth. And if you don't have the skills, this is where step 3 comes in. Find a way to get from step 1 here to step 2 there. And that's step 3. And if you cannot find a way, find somebody who's found the way. The internet is full of books, stories, anecdotes, biographies, autobiographies of people who have managed to get from where you are to where they want to be, which is similar to where you want to be as well. And so find out how they did it. What is the thinking process? We call it modeling. We call it branching out into possibility. We call it condensation of quantum condensation is what it's called, where you start to create a feelable, smellable, tastable, hearable future that you want to create, and make it so compelling that it's just you cannot be without it. And that's what you need. So step 1, know where you are. Step 2, know where you want to be. Step 3, find somebody who will take you there, a mentor, a teacher, and you don't have to pay them. You can find out. They have books. They have many other courses out there. And if you don't want to do that, you find out. That was my alarm clock. And so step 4, and most people don't do this step, is they have all of this ready. And step 4 is take the step. Take action. step into that journey, even if you're not ready, even if you don't have enough education, even if you don't have enough knowledge, even if you don't have enough courage, even if you don't have enough contacts, whatever network, just start and begin. Goethe, the German philosopher, says that great resources come to those who have great action, who take great action plans. Then step 5, monitor your progress. Every day, ask yourself, is what I'm doing bringing me closer or further away from my goal? Ask yourself another question. Is what I'm thinking bringing me closer or further away from my goal? Is what I'm feeling bringing me closer or further away from my goal? So when you start to pay attention to all these things, what you say, what you think, what you do, there is no doubt you will receive your goal. But at the same time, if your goal is enlightenment and to be awakened, so you will start to begin to realize that your priorities, your values are shifting from material concerns towards more spiritual concerns. And those of you who are using the law of attraction for that, you're going to find that you're surrounded by beings that are, well, of a different level, and experiences of a different level. And the things that other people wish for, you don't anymore. You need them by all means. You need to watch, and so on and so forth. Threats. Okay, thank you so much. I've forgotten all of this. So start to pay attention to that. Is always very good. So your inner world then becomes, this is another sign, your inner world is becoming more of a primary aspect for your life experience than the outer world. No longer do you gauge yourself on what you experience outside and who you experience outside. It's more about you. I can spend hours by myself, and people think that that's strange. But you know what? Now with COVID, everybody and their mother is forced to do this. And as a result of doing this, they now live in my world. So how do you cope, Mel Gill, now that you don't go out much, you don't go socializing much, and you don't talk to a lot of people? And I did that for years before COVID. This is normal for me. This is no different. So my inner world has already become a primary major component of my life experience than anything that happens outside. And if people say, well, then you're not a success. Okay, suck on that. That'll be very cool. I don't care what you think my success is or not. It just simply doesn't affect me. And so what if I say, oh, that's not success? Really? Oh my God, I need to change your opinion so that I feel better about myself. Really? Not. I don't. Stop doing that. It's waste of time trying to prove to people that you are worthy, trying to prove to people that you are enough. I mean, you're already having enough of a hard time trying to figure out for yourself that you are enough. Why listen to some clown out there for what? You know, I realize that judgmental, as I said. I'll try and send more love. You don't need to look to other people for validation. Look inside yourself. Also, at the same time, what's going to happen if you're on the correct path of spiritual awakening is that you will begin to hold this tension of opposites within you. Living in a world that is, what shall I say, that have no extremes. You begin to have equanimity at some point, a balance point between everything. And how that works is very simple, and you start to pay attention to that as well. Most of us have a rather rigid, fundamentalist mind that sees things in black and white all the time. And it's a common thing that happens with people. But I have to tell you, the bad news is it's cognitive. There is no nice way to say it. In cognitive behavioral therapy, uh, that's a not a correct way to, yeah, let's say it that way. It's not a correct way to think when you start to think in black and white. People are either good or they're bad. No, you have to pay attention to the gray area. Not everybody is all good. Not everybody is all bad. So when you start to see things less in black and white, or red and blue, or Democrat and Republican for my American friends, or everything is male and female, that's it, period, end of story, good or bad, left or right, you get the idea. You start to begin to realize that those kind of things are in your head, but you are no longer reacting to the world that way. To avoid this ambiguity inherent in mature adulthood, we can cut off one pair of opposites and identify ourselves sometimes with the other, So, for example, as parents, we might think we unconditionally love our children without acknowledging this wellspring of hate and resentment that we have towards some of them for what they're doing and how they're doing it. And you start to pay attention to those things that are happening inside of you as well, because you're not superhuman. You're not super gods all of a sudden looking after kids. You have issues of your own. So while discussing, from one pair of the opposites that seems to resolve our ego's tension, in truth, really, it only reinforces the shadow part of ourselves that we will talk about later. So with our spiritual awakening, we begin to hold this tension of opposites within us, and it puts us on the road to psychic wholeness, when we begin to realize that a person who's been good for 20 years and in the final year steals something is not a thief. It's the action. And if you separate the action from the person, then you begin to see that everything is in terms of what they think, what they do, and what they feel. So if a person feels that way, it doesn't mean that they didn't love you all along. If say a person has loved you for 20 years and in the final year just stopped loving you, it doesn't mean that never loved you from the beginning. And most people who have this black and white thinking, which is a cognitive distortion, then they start thinking, you never loved me. You never loved me from the beginning. I know it. You used me from the start. That kind of craziness goes on all the time. So you start to develop within yourself this another symptom of spiritual awakening, and it's an experience of okayness and inner freedom. What that means is that the ego, normally is our source of fears, desires, constant tension. But when the ego is no longer in control, there's an inherent sense of everything is okay. It's okay. Regardless of what's happening in our lives, good or bad, or other people think good or bad, it's okay. It's all right. When the spirit is at the helm of our life, when the spirit is in charge, then we naturally relax into ourselves. We begin to recognize the truth that everything that is happening was meant to happen. And then we relax into inner peace. We, become the kind of person that provides for ourselves a sense of inner freedom, that we once were looking for in the external world. We find it inside ourselves. So in Hinduism, I think they call this moksha, or self-liberation. In Pali, there's another word for it as well, and Buddha used that a lot as well. Another thing that happens for you to recognize that you are developing spiritually and awakening spiritually is you have a deepening sense of self-honesty and personal responsibility. You start to take, you start to have more accountability for your actions. You start to have more accountability for your words, and you have more accountability for your thoughts. You're thinking the way you're thinking, and pay attention to it. It's not somebody else. You make me feel da-da-da. No one can make you feel anything. You're not a robot, and no one has a remote, that controls you. No one does. You allow yourself to be And so take responsibility for that. I don't know why I reacted this way. I have no idea. When you said that and you called me a name and I reacted, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I should have seen you for the idiot that you are and that you like to use these terms a lot. I'm so sorry. And whatever the case might be. Or like Buddha said, if you argue with an idiot, now there are two. So as you begin to locate more authority within yourself and less authority outside, you begin to recognize some things. The higher you go in awakening, there is a willingness inside of you to be radically honest with yourself. You no longer lie to yourself. You forget about all the affirmations and all of that. I'll deal with that kind of question a little bit later. You simply can't tolerate this the shadow self of you, this game that you play of self deception anymore. I'm the best. I'm lovable. I'm a goddess. I'm a whatever you think you are, god or goddess. Now you will start to feel a growing sense of responsibility and a growing sense of accountability of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions. All of that will start to come to the fore. And it is for this reason that the psychotherapist, I think his name was David Richo, who says that the last gateway to mature adulthood is guilt. And once you've gotten rid of that, then you are no more responsible for everything that has happened in the past. It's not your fault, but you saw your part in it. You saw what you did. And so as a result, you begin to not repeat this in the future. As a result, you begin to forgive yourself and let go of all of those things. And when you realize this, you start to grow. But when you are unconscious to your behavior, there is no accountability. And when there's no accountability, there's nothing to feel guilty about. And so that guilt, what happens then is that guilt comes from, which comes from your spiritual awakening, isn't from someone else shaming you. It's from your conscience, your sense of self, ego, whatever, driven by a force or desire to correct your way of being so that you will appear better in front of other people. But instead, you will start to grow. If you are more spiritually attuned, you will start to grow and make necessary choices in your life that allows you to see your part in any conflict. And you begin to loosen that conflict and you begin to let it go. And that is much better. There is also another symptom or another sign, not symptom, that's not a right word, sign, is that there's a massive change in your lifestyle choices. It's a noticeable sign of spiritual awakening. You become highly conscious of your lifestyle. The things you do, the things you project to the world or not, or the need to explain or to other people by choices of clothes and things that you wear. Many normal things that we did before will become unacceptable for you at that point. And as your connection to the earth increases, for example, your concern for environmental impact, or all of this begins to change the way you react with the environment. And later when we talk about the shadow force, we'll discuss how the other part of you also comes to the fore and starts to change as well. So ethics then becomes a very large driving force over convenience for everything that you do. And the final thing that happens with you with spiritual growth is a sense of interconnectivity, of oneness with people. The ego, or as Alan Watts called it, the superficial self, feels separate and alone. And it fears for its own safety, and so therefore it fights and clings to life while fearing its own death, its own mortality. So it wants to use various emotions. Anger is one of them, to be able to project its life, that it's alive, that it is in control, to the world around it. So you become a belligerent, aggressive person, and so on and so forth. So the original spirit that you want to turn to and become, or as the Buddhists called it, the face before you were born, has no such fear or sense of separation. It doesn't play this ego's game of us versus them, you know. The spirit doesn't identify itself with gender, race, nationality, religion, or even species. When you start to recognize this, it simply is, and it exists outside of space-time. This space-time continuum, this 3D dimensional universe, three-dimensional universe, sorry, it is no longer the purview of spirit. Spirit sees itself living one lifetime. I mean, you see yourself, ego sees itself living one lifetime, beginning and there's an end. And in between, it's got to rule, it's got to do all kinds of stuff. But spirit begins to realize that this is one life out of 100 lives, or 1,000 lives, or 100,000 lives, God knows what. And so it is no longer fearful. Death isn't a relevant concept for it. It's no longer afraid, because it realizes that the essential self was never born and will never die. So it's very important for you to wake yourself up with all of this, and you can do it. Some people do it with sound, quantum. What do they call it? Quantum resonance, or some do it with meditation, some do it with mandalas, some do it with a whole bunch of different things. So recognize that, and then you begin to realize that your values and priorities will change. Because as religion gives you a moral code, based on a system of rules, don't do this, don't do that. Now, from inside of yourself, you can develop a personal ethical framework from which you can evaluate what's best in the context of the moment. And it may not be one of those have to do this, 10 commandments, all of those things. The ego. What is a ego? I don't know. The ego is unable to do this because basic needs drive the ego, and only the higher self can do this. So start to pay attention to that. So this shift towards spiritual values is why our behavior changes during spiritual awakening. Maslow called these spiritual values being values, or B values, he calls them. And they include wholeness, perfection, completion, justice, aliveness, beauty, truth, self-sufficiency. These are words that spirit uses more than everything else. So you begin to recognize that there's a transformation in your inner world. In the average person's waking state, an individual's ego is almost exclusively focused on the outer world, how people perceive you, what they say about you, and so on and so forth. It involves things like work, money, achievement, family, friends, social life. These are all elements of the external environment. And if you get more entrenched in them, then you are living in a very high ego world. Another spiritual awakening sign, like I said, regarding this, is a profound shift from that world, the external world, to your own inner realm of thoughts and feelings and dreams and imagination. I think in Buddhistic culture, this dimension is called the subtle realm, and it's considered more real than the gross dimensions of our waking state. So when you start to pay attention to that, then you begin to realize what is essentially real and what isn't. And then you become more and more spiritual. And what COVID has done, and there's one more comment before I take questions from anyone. For all of these signs, to a tendency for you to slow down, to reflect, this is normal awakening process. And some of the other signs I talked to you about, self-reflection is very necessary. And self-reflection is where you turn back to understand this present moment that you're in. And this reflecting back in what the world before COVID was very challenging because of the fast pace of the environment that we were running. So this drive for success, for achievement, you have unsuccess resources or whatever they are that were running this and trying to sell you on the fact that you need to have more money to be successful or to be considered successful. You have to be achieving this goal to be successful, but that's not. If you're a parent to a child and the child is not in jail yet, you are successful. This drive for achievement, for productivity, for peak performance, they have their place. But they quickly become signs of neurosis. For spiritual awakening, laziness can actually become your very close friend. Now, this whole entire COVID situation has forced us to slow down everything. We no longer are fast-paced. In fact, some of the transport systems were shut down as well because you would be starting to spread some of the disease virus if you got too busy the way you normally were. Big gatherings of people. And to do what? Now they're doing it online, and you just want to switch everything off. And so, like I said before, this spiritual awakening symptom that you begin to slow down more and reflect back more, this impulse comes alive in you to more clearly see and understand yourself and your behavior. This thing is called stopping and seeing. COVID has done that for us. As a planet, as an entire planet, not as one or two schools of thought, as an entire planet, it has brought this up to our attention. And so the whole of mankind is taking this quantum leap forward in awakening to new possibilities. This reflecting actually helps us to access memories in our unconscious mind, and some of these memories that cause irrational behavior or irrational thoughts in the present moment. And this self-reflection doesn't judge, doesn't blame, doesn't criticize, because the spirit is neutral and yet curious while it's neutral. And so I wanted to talk about that today because that was important. Luke could not join me today, my son, who is usually co-hosting the show. And of course, Ashok doesn't seem to want. Ashok, do you want to come on board? And I call him the shy shaman of New York, but we've got a new term for him now. He's known as I forgot what we call him. We called him on Friday something, and I can't remember. So Ashok, if you want to join me, that's the link. And if not, this would be a good time to close, because in the morning I gotta go do some things. I gotta be up at 6:50 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, and get some things done, finish some activity that involve my parents, make things easier for them. But I'll give Ashok 2 minutes, and I'll give anybody a few minutes to ask your questions on both of these formats, Facebook or StreamYard. And they say there's an 8-second or 10-second what's the word? Delay. And there isn't. Okay. And let's bring this this lesson to a close today. Maybe I'll fill you in on what more needs to be talked about and questions that we can answer. I want to shout out to the people who sent some questions in my personal PM. PM. What does PM stand for? My personal messenger, or my messenger, where you wanted them answered by Ashok and Dr. Nisha Rani and myself. And this Friday, day after tomorrow, Nisha Rani will come on board, and so will Ashok Thakur, and both of them will be continuing the discussion. You know, I've forgotten what exactly they were talking. Oh, yes. Sorry. Nisha Rani is going to be discussing the DNA of trauma and how to overcome family trauma that's DNA related, and trauma from our ancestors, ancestral trauma. And Ashok will be teaching us also about the divine feminine, because both of these wonderful people will be discussing about divine feminine as well. And it'll be a lot of fun. So tune in, 9 a.m. New York time, 9 p.m. Singapore time, 4 p.m. Bulgarian time, and I'm not sure what it is in London time. But tune in, it'll be a lot of fun. I was trying to figure out why my thing didn't work. The wrong mouse for the wrong place. To witness and to hold. We have been battered by modern times into obsessive problem solvers. But as life begins to pare us down into only what is essential, it's becoming clearer that the deepest sufferings of heart and of spirit cannot be solved, only witnessed and held. I've struggled with this constantly all of my life. And just recently, after being away for 2 weeks, I returned to a tender friend who lovingly uttered, "I really missed you." And instantly I reacted by scanning for ways to solve the feeling, to limit my travel, or to call more often. And I instantly tried to change my patterns of being away from that relationship, rather than just feel the poignancy of being loved enough to be missed. How can I used to say to a lot of people in jest, how can I miss you if you don't go away? And there's something to that. We need to relax into the possibilities that people come and go and in and out of our lives. Some people are meant to stay, some people are just not. And frequently this reflex to solve, to rescue, to fix, removes us from the tenderness that is at hand, from that moment itself, instead of projecting forward to how we can better improve that. And often intimacy arises not from any attempt to take the pain away, but from a living through together of that pain. Not from a working out how you won't have that pain happen again, but from being with that. Trust, closeness deepens from holding and being held, both emotionally and physically. I am learning, pain by pain, tension by tension, that after all of my strategies and techniques fail, the strength of love waits in receiving and not negotiating, in attempting each other and attempting to accept each other and not problem solving each other, in listening and affirming each other and not trying to change or fix those we love, that we begin to touch the edge of nirvana, that edge of tenderness that we know has always been inside of every experience that comes to us. It has more, all of the joy, all of the happiness has more chance of happening in a relationship, in a chat, in a discussion. It doesn't have to hide its shortcomings. It just has to be in the present moment. Solving something doesn't solve the moment. Adjusting to someone's need doesn't make you better in someone's eyes. You just have to understand that in this solitary journey of life, the people we get to hold along the way have given us a gift, albeit temporary. And that gift is love. That gift is a warm hug. That gift is the ability to see you, be with you, hear you, smell you, taste you, in all of your completeness. Tomorrow, don't pretend anymore. Just be who you are. Those who don't like it, doesn't matter. They'll walk away soon. And you're left with what? You're either left with the people who really love you for who you are, see beyond your words and see beyond your behavior, or you're alone. Either way, you grow spiritually. Good night, everyone.